Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Fox Sociology. So let's get to it. Today we're talking about religion, which is actually something I'm very interested in, even though um, there's not a lot of cutting edge stuff coming out of the sociology of religion. So between this and the assignments for this week, you're covered pretty well. It's I I'm interested in religion because that's something that's universal in human cultures. Yeah, there's atheism and agnosticism and things like that, but there's something about religion in every society. But not everybody has the same religion. This makes religion socially constructed. Okay, it's so it's not something that's given in nature, but emerges out of social interaction. Yet there's something about humans that gets them into religion. And here's a definition. I think it'll become a little bit clearer. Conley says religion is a system of beliefs, traditions, and practices around sacred things. Okay. So that's the whole thing about religion is it's about sacred things. It's not about God, for example. Not all religions acknowledge God. For example, so it's around sacred things. Okay, sacred as opposed to profane. Profane is the everyday world. Sacred is set aside and special and like approached with certain kinds of like a certain kind of awe, you might say. Okay, so it's and also considered very valuable. Okay, so here's some forms of religious organization. It's a little bit different than the text. Okay, the text doesn't really mention ecclesia as far as I could see. An ecclesia is a religious organization that claims to include most or all the members of a society and is recognized as a national or official religion. It's an ascribed status, in other words. Okay, by virtue of one's membership in a society, one becomes a member of that religion. So yes, there are some societies that have like a state religion or like in being a member of that society means that you are a member of that religion. Denominations are large, and sometimes they're related to ecclesia, in that it could be the same religion, but it's not the official religion. Okay, not the official religion of the society. Okay, or they're not really dominant there. So, um, certain kinds of say, um, you know, mainline Christianity or Judaism or Islam in the United States. Those would be denominations. They'd be large enough. Okay, so, but they're not the official religions. Okay, whereas look in other societies, you'll see some of that are ecclesia. There are two smaller kinds of religious organizations. One is sect. Okay, sects. Okay, sects are small and they're broken away from the larger organizations in order to renew what it views as the original version of the faith. So, oftentimes, religions will change. Well, they do change or they'll die. Okay. So what happens when religions change or things, there's like often a small group of people who say, who are not satisfied with the changes that the larger religion is making. So they break away and they form a smaller organization. One example is that if you go to Utah, or if you look at Utah, there are some religious organizations there that broke away from the Mormons, okay, and to renew what they felt was the original version of Mormonism, okay. For example, there are some that practice polygamy, okay. Cults have a bad name, okay. All a cult is a new religion or a major innovation on an old religion, not necessarily led by a charismatic leader who makes their followers drink Kool-Aid. Okay, this means that all religions start as cults. Okay, and then they grow and become institutionalized, and then they are ecclesia or denominations. Okay, so it's so they are all religions start as cults, and yeah. So it's not a matter of a charismatic leader brainwashing people and things like that. They have a bad name in the press, but that's not what it is sociologically. Okay, but they are often secretive, and and they're small. Okay, so here's some theories of religion to think about. Theories of religion in sociology. This borrows a little from anthropology too. One theory comes from a guy named Branislaw Malinowski. It's from a functionalist perspective. Functionalists believe that religion is functional by promoting a sense of collective consciousness or a body of beliefs that are common to a community or society that give people a sense of belonging. So it's a collective consciousness. So Branislaw Malinowski says that the function of religion is a psychological function to allay anxiety. Okay, that's the whole thing, is to allay anxiety. In all human societies, there's practical knowledge of how to get things done. For example, there's no knowledge of how to grow crops or how to hunt, some very basic stuff. But sometimes we need a little more. We may have all the knowledge in the world about how to grow crops and hunt, but if there's a drought or if there are no animals around to hunt, what do? Well, we set up some magical rites and some prayers, and we make the leap. We resort to magic or prayer or things. I'm using that term magic very broadly. A lot of the and that allays anxiety. You plant the crops, you pray for rain, or do a little ritual to bring the rain comes, and then that's also proof of the existence of God. Okay, so it's to relieve that anxiety about things. So on a more micro level, we could see this, I suppose. Say like, somebody has a loved one in the hospital in the intensive care unit, they might turn to prayer, even though they don't pray very often, because they're to allay anxiety, okay, about what is unknown. Can't hurt, that's for sure. So A.R. Radcliffe Brown says, no, it's not to allay anxiety. It has a social function of causing anxiety, okay? Radcliffe Brown says that religion exists to establish and promote certain social values that unify society, and these values are reinforced in religious ritual. When one does not abide by the social values that unify society, they may be threatened with hell or eternal damnation or magic being used against them. So it's a mode of social control. It is to cause anxiety in people so that they obey the rules. Okay? So Malinowski says it's to allay anxiety, to alleviate anxiety. Radcliffe Brown says it's to cause anxiety. They had a big argument about this for a long time, okay, which you could say easily that both are right, but it's that's what academics like to do, argue. Okay. Durkheim. He was really into religion. Those of you who, I think I've said before that Durkheim's not my favorite sociologist, but I really like his book called The Elementary Forms of Religious Life. He ends it basically by saying God is society. Here's a quote from here. Quote, "It is unquestionable that a society has all that is necessary to arouse the sensation of the divine in minds merely by the power that it has over them. For to its members, it is what a god is to its worshippers. In fact, a god is, first of all, a being whom men think of as superior to themselves and upon whom they feel that they depend. Now, society also gives us the sensation of perpetual dependence, since it has a nature which is peculiar to itself and different from our individual nature. It pursues ends which are likewise special to it. But as it cannot attain them except through our intermediacy, it imperiously demands our aid. It requires that, forgetful of our own interests, we make itself its servitors, and it submits us to every sort of inconvenience, privation, and sacrifice, without which social life would be impossible. Okay. So basically, the advantage to this is that you get to go back and listen to me read it again. But so he's basically saying that society is a lot like God. It is like it has a nature all its own, but yet it exists because humans exist. It pursues its own ends and cannot achieve them without us intervening. So it demands things from us, like God. Okay, so and that we're like perpetually dependent upon society as we're perpetually dependent upon God. Okay, so if you look at a lot of things in society, you'll see like certain kinds of rituals that have been called civil religion. Okay, things like the national anthem, the flag, certain kinds of symbols in society have been given the kind of a status of sacredness. Okay. For any of you who have gone to Washington, D.C. and seen the original version of the Constitution, or one of the original versions, it's behind this glass case and things, people are approaching it as if the document is sacred. Okay, and there are certain ways you treat the flag, how like you're not supposed to let it touch the ground because it's considered sacred. Okay, these symbols of society show that there's a kind of like a correlation here between God and society. Okay, so I once read an article that basically claimed that modern day capital punishment is a form of human sacrifice. So you might think of it that way. Okay. Marx. Karl Marx. Here's his contribution. Here's his quote from Contribution to the Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right, Introduction. Quote, "Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people." Okay. So, to Marx, religion was a way for people to be distracted from their oppressed state. He says that the proletariat find comfort in religion and the possibility of an afterlife where life would not be so tough. It's the idea that, life is hard right now, but the afterlife is rich in rewards. That's where you find your rewards. Okay. Marx says, no, that's a bourgeois plot. Okay, that's a way to keep the proletariat down. And what the proletariat need to do is unite, develop class consciousness, and overthrow the bourgeoisie. So, it basically numbs people, that religion numbs people to their oppressed state, gets them to ignore it. Okay, so that's what he means by Marx. What Marx means about religion being the opiate of the people, if you've ever heard that phrase before. Okay, now it gets kind of complicated. Max Weber and his book, The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Okay, so let's start. Weber is having an argument with Marx, not about religion, but about idealism and materialism. Remember, Marx is a materialist. Marx is one who says that our ideas are the result of the physical world. Okay, so he's a materialist. Max Weber is saying, Karl, usually that's true, but not always. And I can think of one time where ideas shaped the physical world, and that's how the Protestant ethic affected capitalism. Okay. So, Um, so here's what Weber says in a nutshell. He's looking at followers of John Calvin a lot in the United States. He is very much, looked a lot at Ben Franklin, actually. Calvinists, those who followed the Puritan John Calvin, who believed in predestination. Predestination says that it's already been decided whether or not you're going to heaven, and there's nothing you can do about it to change it. Weber thought that this would produce some anxiety among the Calvinists, and so he thought that the Calvinists would look for hints about their destiny. So this led them to do two things. One was to work in a calling, okay, and two, not spend money, to develop an aesthetic lifestyle and not indulge in worldly things. Well, if you work, you got that Protestant work ethic, and you don't, spend your money, what's going to happen? You're going to get a bigger bank account, okay? That's the sign you're going to heaven, okay? That you're one of the chosen, that you have this bank account here. So, these practices become institutionalized, capitalism takes off. The aesthetic lifestyle is not as institutionalized as it once was, so it falls away. So the quote, victorious capitalism, since it rests on mechanical foundations, needs its support no longer. So all of those ideas, those spiritual ideas that supported capitalism fell away, and this made capitalism very mechanistic, demoralizing, and put us in an iron cage. Okay, this is a big quote from the Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. The Puritan wanted to work in a calling. We are forced to do so. For when asceticism was carried out of the monastic cells into everyday life and began to dominate worldly morality, it did its part in building the tremendous cosmos of the modern economic order, capitalism. This order is now bound to the technical and economic conditions of machine production, which today determine the lives of all the individuals who are born into this mechanism, not only those directly concerned with economic acquisition, with irresistible force. He refers to a guy named Baxter. In Baxter's view, the care for the external goods should lie on the shoulders of the saint like a light cloak, which can be thrown aside at any moment. But fate decreed that the cloak should become an iron cage. Now we need to have care for external goods. Okay? So we are trapped in that kind of capitalist economic system, okay, that, and there is no kind of spiritual basis for it anymore, as the Puritan had, okay. So the results of this cage, as Weber says, I love this line, specialists without spirit, sensualists without heart. Okay, that's a great line. Specialists without spirit, sensualists without heart. Okay, so this leads to kind of a disenchantment with the world. Okay, trapping them in an iron cage of rule-based rational control. Okay, which is very in bureaucracy and efficiency and all of those things. Think of the McDonaldization of society, that reading you did. Think about how, and all of those things about how, just dominant they are. And think about how, there was one time when these kinds of things were supported by a spiritual point of view that has now fallen away. So Weber, by the way, was very depressed. You could look that up a little more if you want. So, if we could prove that there was no God, what would happen? That's the question I put. You might want to ponder this a second. If we could prove absolutely 100% that there is no God, what would happen? One answer to this is belief would grow stronger. Okay? This is from the theory of cognitive dissonance. Those who have taken psychology know about cognitive dissonance. And I could teach this in many sections of the class, but I teach this out of religion because a lot of the ideas came out of a guy named Festinger who wrote a book called When Prophecy Fails. Okay. Cognitive dissonance is the discomfort felt when there is a conflict between a belief on that one is committed to and new information contrary to that belief. Okay. For example, have you ever gotten into an argument with somebody and you are sure you're right, but then they show you evidence that says that you are wrong? Okay. And this has happened to me before. Okay. You get kind of confused. Okay. You're just like, what? And one way that people deal with this is that they look for ways to resolve these two competing ideas. Okay. It's troubling to have that. Okay. So you bring in a new thought that reconciles the belief. Okay. So Leon Festinger and his associates studied a cult in the 1950s. Their leader predicted a great flood that would engulf the earth. But those who are faithful would be spared by aliens on December 21st, which is about the winter solstice. Okay. And I'm not sure if it was the winter solstice that year, but chances are it was. So, after the date passed, there's no flood, no aliens, and the faithful were gathered at a place waiting. And at first, the followers were confused, but then their leader, somebody named that identified as Mrs. Keach, introduced a new cognition that the world had been saved from disaster because of the followers' faith. So when disconfirmation occurs, when prophecy fails, belief will become stronger under the following conditions. First, a belief must be held with deep conviction to be relevant to what the believer does. They really have to live it, okay? They have to be committed to the belief to the point to where they have taken some important action that is difficult to undo. So these followers were basically preaching that the world is going to end on December 21st. So, believe and be saved and all that. The belief also must be specific to concern and concerned with the real world. Another, something that can be disconfirmed. Okay, something that we can look at and say, see, no flood. Okay. Such undeniable disconfirmatory evidence must occur and must be recognized by the individual holding the belief. Okay, so they have to say, yeah, that didn't happen. Okay, and then finally, the individual believer must have social support. Festinger says that it's unlikely that one isolated believer could withstand the kind of disconfirming evidence, but if the believer is a member of a group of convinced persons who can support one another, the belief will be maintained. Okay, so this is one thing that can happen, that if we could prove that there is no God, belief in God would grow stronger. Okay, somebody would bring in another thought. Okay, another thought that reconciles, the belief on the one hand and the disconfirmatory evidence on the other. And this is what happened in this cult, is that the belief grew stronger. They became more committed to the belief. They became, did more for the organization. So, these 5 conditions specify the circumstances under which increased proselytizing would be expected to follow disconfirmation. Okay, you can apply this to other things outside of religion. Okay, to where people believe things and they're very committed to it, and then they have disconfirmatory evidence. So that does happen. You might see that in political discourse sometime, which we'll be talking about next time. Okay. Have a